Asking if it took care of my concerns
Yeah, we're going to
about the
address.
legality. That's been changed?
I'll go through a couple of
Okay.
changes. Yeah,
Pardon?
sure will. If I can, just for a moment, let me just to be real clear to the members of the committee, the heart and intent of this bill and this legislation is to somehow find the best way to provide an option for families in Georgia in conjunction and consultation with their physicians to access a cannabidiol oil that is high in CBD and low in THC, similar to or with the exact composition of as Charlotte's Web, the cannabidiol product that's being seen to have such success out in Colorado in patients with seizure disorders. Since Charlotte Web contains THC, it is an illegal, untested in clinical trials, non-FDA approved drug at this point. And accessing it across state lines under current federal law and guidelines and restrictions is prohibited and provides a major obstacle in our bill. And so we've tried to address that. We clearly have an access problem of how do we get a medical cannabis that is not FDA approved into Georgia when it would violate federal law transporting across state lines. So we've tried to address that, and I think I can show you a couple of things of how we've tried to do that. Let me take you to, if I can, to where we've made some changes. Lines 97 to 99. We had Dr. Flamini, if you remember last time, who came here and testified, one of the most respected pediatric neurologists here in the state, who said he's attempted to try and, who had many of the families that are in attendance today and who were here last time, who he was their doctor for their children, suggested that we make sure we add a pediatric neurologist to have an opportunity to be approved by the board that would provide oversight to this process to utilize medical cannabis in conjunction with an approved medical center. So we've added that in lines 97 to 99. A pediatric neurologist, he would have that ability. We've also added in line 199, there was concern about that, as I mentioned earlier, about obtaining cannabidiol oil across state lines, that was actually illegal to do that. We've added that the word legal in line 199, that an academic medical center may obtain cannabis from any available legal source. In case there are changes in this ever-changing landscape in our country about cannabidiol oil. I personally believe and have a conviction that there will be changes at the federal level, whether it be with DEA, with the Justice Department, or the Obama administration, because there's such a demand for cannabidiol oil in our country because of the success it's seen in Colorado. And then in lines 247 to 248, we have tried to address the access problem that we clearly have by providing a cultivation option. And the language in 247, 258, it allows, it permits an approved Georgia academic medical center, and those academic medical centers are defined as either, clearly defined as either Georgia Regents or Emory or Mercer or Morehouse, to cultivate, process, and distribute medical cannabis. They'll not be required to participate, but they will have the option to participate in the program. And then the last section, Madam Chair, we've also added language in lines 260 to 278. And I'll just walk through this real quick. I won't spend a lot of time here. This is, Congress passed the Farm Bill a couple of weeks ago that allowed for the cultivation of industrial hemp in states that have a model that allows that growth in their state. So that was the attempt in Section 260 to 278 to allow industrial hemp to be grown Industrial hemp is a different form of a cannabis plant. It has very minimal, if any, THC. But I'd like to, Madam Chair, with your permission, we've had some further discussions on this particular section with because it has to be set up through the Department of Agriculture. We've had some discussions with Gary Black today, Commissioner Black. And so with your permission, I'd like to strike this language, section 2, lines 260 through 278 at the appropriate time. I think it may need some further study. So, and then the last thing we added was in lines 296.
Wait a minute, Representative Peake. Okay, so we're striking
lines.
I know what we're striking the lines, but are we striking the growth of hemp?
We're striking all the language that was put in there to comply with the Farm Bill, and so yes, everything related to industrial hemp, lines 259 through 278.
So you're not planning to grow hemp?
That is correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That is my intention, and we'll do it through a motion through another member making that motion, whatever your preference.
Okay. So what are we going to be growing where?
Well, we would still be allowed in lines 247 to 258 to grow medical cannabis. Which
okay. One of the things, but just not hemp.
That's correct. What we'll be missing out is having the structure through the Farm Bill approved by Congress to grow industrial hemp, which is legal to do. I mean, it's not.
If the states then
have the model for it, that's correct.
Right. I mean, the Congress gave us, I'm not correct, Representative Peake, that Congress said it was okay, but they also put it on the states to ratify, and we could decide what we wanted to do.
That's correct.
So at this time, we would not be making the decision
on industrial hemp.
Industrial hemp.
That's correct. Yes,
okay.
ma'am. So that will, Lynn Witten may have to help me, but that may, I don't know if that'll change the numbering of the last couple of sections by taking out that section, but
it will.
So we may have to address that too.
You working on it, Betsy?
Yeah, we'll probably just reserve that code section number.
Okay.
Okay.
Right, that'd be fine. So you don't have to change the numbers.
Take it and
right.
accept it. Okay.
And then last, Madam Chair, in language 296, and the members of the committee, lines 296 through 304, we added language to provide protection for employers that have a drug-free workplace environment. This was suggested and requested by the Georgia Chamber and the National Federation of Independent Business. So, Madam Chair, I appreciate the opportunity to debate this important issue. The bottom line on this bill. I
don't think we're having a debate. I think we're just going to need to answer questions.
Okay, that'd be good, and look forward to that. The bottom line of this bill is how do we provide an opportunity for families in this state who have children with seizure disorders to make a decision in conjunction with their medical professional of what's in the best interest for their child, and so that's the heart and intent of this bill. And Madam Chair, I look forward to answering questions.
Right. Before we have questions from the committee, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention, Representative Peake, and to the families that are here. I think there was some confusion last time. You seem to have taken offense that we let people come who had other ideas that were in opposition to you. That's what we do in committee meetings. We don't just give one side of the issue. There are varying concerns about this, and people have varying ideas about it, and we are charged with trying to put out the very best bills that we possibly can. And I understand that I was blamed as being the one who was against this bill, and it's been out all over the web and everything, which is, your prerogative. It's okay. But I certainly want to help children, but I am charged with trying to put out the best bill we can and a bill that will work. And you get that by asking questions and going through and making sure that bills are written correctly. And that is what I was trying to do, and the people that came were just giving what their opinion was. Okay.
Madam Chair, can I add a couple more comments before we start any questions?
Sure.
I did want to, I think I sent to most members of the committee, I hope if I had your correct email, information about the National Epilepsy Foundation, and I think this is a pretty important point, that issued a statement this past week, and I won't read you, but just a couple of sentences I think that are pretty important. The Epilepsy Foundation supports the rights of patients and families living with seizures and epilepsy to access physician-directed care, including medical marijuana. They also call for an end to DEA restrictions that limit clinical trials and research into medical marijuana for epilepsy. And then kind of the most telling thing I think that came out of their report they issued this last week was that the statement where they said if an epilepsy patient and their doctor feel that marijuana is the best treatment option, and they need to have a safe legal access to medical marijuana, and they need that access now. I think that's just compelling argument that while we're dealing with an issue that is tough for a lot of people to get their hands around, the medical profession, I believe, is coming to a point where they say, hey, this should be an option for families. We should figure out a way to be able to have a cannabidiol oil that is technically and illegal from a federal standpoint available to families. And so, again, that goes to the heart of what this bill is that we just want to provide an option for those families in conjunction with the medical professionals to make that decision on their own. So,
And I'm sure you want that to be a safe
yes, ma'am.
product that we offer to families.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct?
Sure do. Sure do. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Representative Parsons.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Representative Peake, this is going to sound like a really crazy question, I guess, but I'm just trying to understand where the FDA comes in on something like this. I mean, I'm thinking of my mother and my aunts and ancestors who used all kinds of roots and all kinds of things that Indians used, mountain cures and things like that. So if I'm just trying to understand where FDA comes in on something like that and their approval. If yellow root were found hypothetically to help with this situation, would it have to have FDA approval to be used for this? I mean, I don't understand why it has to have. It seems like it's only because it's identified to help with this particular issue that it has to have, other than it's derived from marijuana. But exactly how does that work?
Representative Chairman Parsons, the best answer I can give you is that marijuana is a Schedule I narcotic. I mean, it is considered illegal in our country.
Is there a national or federal law against it? I guess there is.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's federal law.
What I would like to address, and that's a good question. It kind of gets to the heart of the matter of should we be allowing a drug that's not FDA approved access to families and our children in our state. And I had a letter from a family that I think is really telling. Let's go directly to the source. Let's go to a family that has had experience, who has a child with a seizure disorder, who has experienced giving an FDA-approved drug to their child. And there were some interesting, and I got a letter from a family, in fact, one of the families that's represented here, and they said briefly that they work with doctors to prescribe the best medicine. Some of those are not FDA approved. They are actually working with physicians now to give medicine to their children that are not FDA approved.
Representative Peake, wouldn't those be medicines that are approved for one use, but then physicians are using them? They've been through FDA testing often, and they're using them offline.
It could be, yes, ma'am.
No, I believe that would be the only way that physicians would be able to write a prescription.
The interesting thing is that this particular family go on to say, and if you don't mind, many of the medicines that have been FDA approved have much more serious side effects than cannabis. In fact, the current medicines their daughter's on and have been FDA approved cause liver damage, kidney failure, and even fatal rashes. In fact, the committee saw a picture of a child who was having side effects from an FDA approved drug. They also attempted to try and go through the process to get Epidiolex, which, as we heard last time, is an option for some of our families through GW Pharma. It's only currently available. It's only currently available for a very limited number of patients as part of an orphan drug trial. Their neurologist actually applied for the trial, spent months trying to deal with the paperwork, has not yet been allowed to start the trial, and once he does start, he'll only be allowed to test it on 25 patients. It's also only limited to 2 specific seizure disorders. So.
Representative Peake, did we not talk about there's another option to that called an expanded access trial that people can apply for, just so the people and the parents here will know should something happen and this bill has a long ways to go before it is finished. There's 2 sides to this, just to be perfectly honest with people, and I don't believe in giving false hopes, and we do have another chamber and just to work it through. So just being realistic, I'm not saying it's not going to, but it does. There is something, when we talked about it, an expanded access where there can be one major trial person, pediatric neurologist doing it, and then there can be sub ones. They start off with 25 patients, and then they can ask for more to cover more children, because it's where they realize that there are children in need of the drugs because they have a condition that needs it right away, and it's a special kind of thing that you ask for.
And we would.
And Children's had expressed interest in doing that kind of thing, and Children's has, I don't know, 16 pediatric neurologists. Not that all 16 would want to do something, but they do have a large number of pediatric. So there are other options, and they tell me it's a 30-day turnaround process for when they get to that point.
Right. And Madam Chair, I agree. Every option, we ought to pursue every option for these families.
I agree. I mean, you know
no
matter what this bill does, I think that, and I plan to encourage children to go ahead and apply for those and start with this expanded statewide thing from the feds to try to do this. A bird in the hand's worth two in the bush, and
Yes, ma'am.
there are FDA-approved things that they can start testing with now, too, a synthetic and another one made. So, that. Okay. Representative Broadway.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Peak, I've got about 3 quick questions for you. One, and I think you and I have talked about this, wouldn't you think it is our inherent responsibility, if we move forward with this, that there's 3 caveats? One, that we have something that is safe, effective, and legal. And I think you've addressed some of the legal questions here. And then in this therapeutic research program, that this is defined as pretty much specific diagnosis. You know, define it in the bill, but I know the testimony we've had before that there's some specific diagnosis as it relates to the use of cannabis oil.
Yeah, that's correct. Let me address
Okay.
the second question, the second part of the question first.
Okay.
Because I'll forget it if I don't.
Okay.
In current law, current law, we have a structure set up for glaucoma and cancer.
Exactly.
All we're adding is the third diagnosis of seizure disorders. So
Okay.
it would be limited to just patients with seizure disorders. The additional language would be.
All right, but these are pretty specific seizure disorders that are defined for this use. I think Epilepsy Foundation has got those.
That's correct. There are several syndromes that cause epilepsy, so I'm not sure I can tell you how many of those are, but there are. The families could probably tell you better than I can, but the most common is Dravet syndrome and Lennox-Gastaut, but there are several others that
Exactly.
cause seizures.
Okay.
Let me address the safe, effective, and legal. Yes, we've already addressed the legal. We want to make sure that if we get it here, that we're doing it in legal fashion.
Right.
And so that's why we're looking to the cultivation option in our state. Safe and effective.
Somewhat anecdotal, but
It is. I'll make this argument to you, and again, I would go back to a parent who could probably answer this better than I can.
Exactly.
They're giving FDA-approved drugs to their children that are causing incredibly negative side effects.
harm.
So
Exactly.
while it may be calming the seizure, it's causing other potential neurological and cognitive issues. Is it effective? I think it's a crapshoot on any drug you take.
Exactly.
Quite frankly, so.
Okay, and one other thing, we are somewhat authorizing to move forward with a controlled substance therapeutic research program that would be monitored by the research institutes. And that process of application is going to be long and arduous, it's going to be very narrowly defined, and so therefore none of this would move forward until that application is received and in place.
That's correct. We didn't put the rules and regulations in the bill on purpose. We figured we'd leave that to the medical professionals at the Georgia Medical Composite Board and part of the Patient Review Board
Right.
to help draft the rules and regulations for the practice of medicine. It potentially is dangerous when we as legislators get into the practice of medicine. So that was why that was left vague and broad, and will be left up to the discretion of that board.
And then in the bill, you also defined testing capacity. There would be no general appropriations needed forward with this. It would be it would be carried on by the institutions. Any cost associated with that would be by the institutions themselves.
That is probably not correct. If we move forward with the bill, and it's appropriated, it'd have to be appropriated funds for probably some administrative cost at Georgia Medical Composite Board and probably some appropriated cost at Georgia Drugs and Narcotics.
But those are not defined in the bill as we have it here.
They are not. They're subject to appropriation. My best guess, when we've asked those agencies for an estimate of their costs, or about $125,000 on an annual basis for each agency. Okay. So a cost of around $250,000.
Okay.
An annual cost.
All right. All right. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
On the seizures, one of the things we suggested was intractable seizures. I think what Representative Broderick was getting at is that there are some seizure disorders that, I mean, all seizures are serious, but there's some that minor seizures can come and go. And is that what you were trying to say, that it's pretty wide and would
It's pretty broad.
It is. And again, the argument I'd make to you, you ask one of these parents whether it's 2 seizures or 100 seizures a day, it doesn't make a difference.
No.
And
that's
so
that's not the issue. It's what's causing them, and the difference in what's causing them.
right. And that's why we left it broad for seizure disorders. If a child has 1 or 2 seizures a day and can be provided some relief by medical cannabis, hey, that ought to be a decision that's made between the parent and the doctor. And so that's why it was left broad.
Okay. Representative Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, Representative Peak. Just a couple of points of clarification. Representative Parsons was asking about FDA and non-FDA. You know, as a physician, practicing physician, we've used drugs off-label that are FDA approved and non-FDA. I mean, the list that I can just recall off the top of my head, you know, seizure medicines that are now used as weight loss medicines, blood pressure medicines that are used as migraines, blood pressure medicines that grow hair back for some people with that we used to use for mixtures. That's now Rogaine that is over the counter.
Settle down out there. Settle down.
Yeah, I got you.
We'll let Reinders go first.
And then something that, you know, that Representative Josh Clark is probably much more familiar with is those medicines that are not FDA approved that are vitamins. That Senator Burke in the audience that many of his patients in the past have used, you know, plant estrogens that are over the counter, medicines that are you know, antidepressants that have very similar chemical composition as Prozac, fluoxetine. Medicines that I deal with every day that patients take instead of the statin drugs that I prescribe, like whether they're Zocor or Lipitor or Crestor, those medicines that are used over the counter that come in red rice yeast extract. So those are not FDA approved by any means. They are vitamins. They're over the counter, and yet do they work? Many of them work. Many of them have, you know, worse side effects than the FDA approved. Some of them have less side effects. Some of them are less effective or more effective. But that to me gets to the crux of the whole question that we're here. Believe me, you know, for the parents in the audience, I think the compassionate usage in patients, whether it's Truve or Lennox-Gastaut or whatever seizure disorder that they may have, that they tried a dozen different medicines and they're on 2 or 3 different medicines, you know, let the pediatric neurologist and the research team go with that and let them have the compassionate usage for that. But to me, you know, I'll give you that. I think that's important with this bill, and I hope we're able to do that. But I'll tell you, to me, it's really the bigger picture. The bigger picture is the research that we will be able to do here in Georgia, that if the DEA will do the right thing, and the DEA will make this instead of a Schedule I, which supposedly has no medical usage at all, and if they move it to Schedule II where we can do research, or if we can do research now and show that this obviously does have medical benefit, then I think we've done something here in Georgia that we can be proud of. Compassionate usage and research.
Mr. Allen's in the audience, so Mr. Allen, can you come forth, and I want you to explain why it's still and what part of it is, so the committee will understand about what makes it a Schedule I drug and the cannabinoids and the difference in that.
Do you want a history going back to 1900?
No, sir. You just told me there are about 70 cannabinoids, and they are.
No, what has happened back in the, I believe it's the 40s,
Turn is he on?
can you hear me? I'll bend over.
That must not be one chip.
In
It's on?
the 40s that
There.
the
Okay.
federal government classified marijuana as not usable. And then in 1970, I believe it was 70, when the DEA came about, they classified it as a Schedule 1, which means it doesn't have any medical use. And since that day, they have stayed right there. They have not rescheduled it. They have not seen, in their minds, anything that says it should be used for medical purposes. Now, FDA is tied to FDA. Just like right now, they're trying to reschedule hydrocodone to Schedule 2. The DEA is tied hand and foot with FDA. So unless the FDA comes out and supports it, the DEA really has no choice. So they're tied together.
Okay, and that's what. But it was the cannabinoids. You said that, like, you've got the marijuana, and there are these about 70 cannabinoid.
Yes, ma'am. That's
Okay.
good.
All right, and they are used for. I mean, they are being used. Research is being done on some of them, but they remain
Schedule 1.
Schedule 1s, the different ones, the things we make CBD from. Okay, those remain Schedule 1s, which causes the problem in about it. Right. So.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Right.
Right. If Bruce would remember, and excuse me, Representative Broderick, and those of you who were here back when the legislature rescheduled a drug called Marinol, which is THC, the synthetic THC, and made it a Schedule 3, that was a big to-do. But it's out there, and it is THC, and it is used for cancer. So there is a portion of it that is allowed to be used for medical use. I mean, Dr. Watson understands, I don't know if Dr. Hawkins used it.
Isn't that the one? Isn't that the one that they use for nausea and cancer patients?
Yes, ma'am. That's
Nausea
what's
and
used for
cancer
nausea.
patients.
And,
So-
Madam Chair, and that,
Yeah.
I think that gets to the, thanks, Mr. Allen. I think it gets to the heart of the matter of the access issue. Just to be clear, 20 other states have approved medical cannabis in their state. Every single one of them grow it there, cultivate it there, process it there, and distribute it to their citizens. And so as we found out, that's pretty much the option, the best option we've got available to us right now is to, even though it's against federal law in those 20 other states, they're still processing it, cultivating it, and providing it to patients on a compassionate use. And so that's what we'd be asking to do in this bill as well.
Representative Peake, in doing my due diligence and reasons for asking the bill to be drawn narrowly, is that in researching about the states that have done medical marijuana, what they are finding is about over 80% of the suggestions, because doctors can't write prescriptions, they have to, suggest that you go get it in those states. Over 80% of the people they send to get marijuana for medical issues are written or not written, are made by 3 or 4 or 5 doctors in those states that are better known as shyster doctors, and that will give it for most anything. And I think that's why we've looked so carefully at this bill, trying to make sure that we open it up, but that we are not opening it up for people to take, to take advantage of the other things. It's why there's been concern that it really truly is for children who need it desperately, and these families who need the relief, but not opening our state up to become a state where people use it and shyster doctors make lots and lots and lots of money by recommending people go get it just basically for recreational use.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I agree with you that clearly is not where we want to go
No,
as a state.
and I know
this
that's
body
not.
doesn't want us to go there. And that's why it's so crucial that we have it housed with the academic medical center. It's also why we have added a pediatric neurologist who's only approved by the Georgia Medical Composite Board in conjunction with an academic medical center as approved distributor of that product as well, too.
Representative Kaiser.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just wanted to say, as a co-sponsor of the bill, I've heard and I've taken it to heart comments about the emotion of it. And I just wanted to say that when I went to Representative Peake, I think maybe you and I at the time were the only two people that were going to sign the bill. It's something for 2 years that I have been looking at and talking to folks about. It's never was an emotional issue for me personally. But I will say that as a result of getting involved and being supportive, and I had a wonderful conversation with Representative Pack today because I do want to know all the sides of the issue. For me personally, I've become so comfortable with what we're doing, but the emotion of it has set in a little bit because I now have met a 10-year-old boy in my neighborhood who just returned from Colorado. And so I think that what I've been compelled to hear at this point is that parents are just asking us to understand that there are safety issues, but to give them the trust to know that there's a desperate need for this for their kids. And I guess at the time, if it becomes the will of the committee, Madam Chairwoman, I would be honored in a bipartisan fashion to make a motion.
Well, Representative Kaiser, since you were one of the first people to stand with Representative Peake, I'll give you that privilege. If you just remind me, I'm getting older. Okay, Representative Kidd.
Thank you, Representative Kaiser.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. As you know, Mr. Chairman, I'm 100% in support of what you're asking. I've got one question and one point. Like on page 3, line 74. Now that you're sitting there, you're the marijuana expert sitting here right now. And is there anything in the legislation, or could you assure us as it goes through the system, that we don't undo some of the legislation that was passed back in the 80s for the use of marijuana for glaucoma and so forth, as it struck marijuana on line 74 and said cannabis only for the use in treating glaucoma? I mean, I don't know. Is cannabis and marijuana the exact same thing in this situation? I don't know. And I'm not knowing if you know, but in the process of moving forward, could you just double check that?
We have checked on that. We didn't do anything to change current law. That was the intent, was let's leave what's there under current law. Cannabis is just another name, the technical scientific name, I guess, for marijuana. Is the best way to
country boy, all we have was rabbit tobacco, so I don't know.
Yeah.
The other point is you made as far as the cost to the medical board.
Yes, sir.
As you're aware, or Dr. Watson and I was aware, that the medical board is a freestanding board attached to the Department of Community Health for administrative purposes only. So it really doesn't get any money from the state. It functions on the money raised by the doctors that they're licensed by that board. And so if there are funds that need to help this, we need to do it through the legislature rather than access the funds that the doctors pay themselves.
Yeah. Well,
I just point that out.
Okay.
Anybody on appropriations? Are you sure? Yeah, it's attached, but does it really not?
The Georgia Medical Deposit Board does have a budget through the state appropriations process. So
yeah, it does. Its money goes into the state. It's not a free. I mean, it's attached to. It's a freestanding, but the money goes into the budget and is appropriated back. Correct? It might have been that way a long time ago, Representative Kidd. The other thing is, the old law had sort of become obsolete. For your knowledge, I know more about this than I ever wanted to know. Because of what's the name of it, Dr. Watson, the drug for nausea with cancer patients? Marinol. Soon after they passed the laws in 1982 or something, Marinol became available through prescription. And so that took care, and that is a synthetic cancer, synthetic marijuana, so that took care of the need for patients to have the marijuana for that. And then they began to find that glaucoma, it does lower the pressure in glaucoma, but it sends the blood pressure sky high. So that was not, since elderly people are usually the ones that have glaucoma, then they didn't use it for that. So the law has sort of become obsolete. In fact, the medical board had been asking for that part of the law to be removed, and it was an unbilled, and then slating to go through when we remove old bills. So that's sort of the history. So there's nothing that's happened to it, and it's sort of obsolete in that part of the law. Okay, Representative Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Peak, I had two questions, but I think Dr. Watson has already addressed one of them, and that was in regards to doctors being able to recommend treatments that aren't FDA approved at their discretion. And I just want to thank you for your work on this. I know it's been you've poured a lot into this bill, and for me, this goes back to last year. I shared that with you, Aaron Kleppinger. We have a strong mutual friend. And when I heard his story and they said, what do you think about him going to Colorado? I said, if that were my child and I tried everything else, I'd certainly do that. And I said, but my concern at that point was wondering whether this was the move, without knowing someone personally, as you have met someone in your neighborhood, I wondered whether it was just a ploy or a underhanded move to legalize recreational marijuana. So I asked him, I said, I'd like to follow this. And, of course, he testified in the last hearing. The results were just incredible with his son, Hunter. So, I thank you for your work on this, and I certainly feel that this decision should be left between the doctor and the patient to make that decision. And I appreciate your work and allowing this as an option for these families.
Yeah. Thank you, Representative Clark, and I'll follow up on that. There have been a lot of people that have worked really hard on this bill and become engaged, as Representative Kaiser, almost from an emotional standpoint. And at the end of the day, it is a human story. It's about how do we help Georgia families? How do we give them options to make decisions in conjunction with their medical professionals? What's in the best interest of their child? Any of us would want that. Any of us, me included, anybody on this committee, we're in that same position. You'd want that choice for your child or your grandchild. And so that's why I'm grateful to so many who have shown a lot of courage on this committee and in the House to step up and tackle a very difficult issue. So.
Representative Howard. Representative Henson. Sorry. Watson, Representative Watson, what are we doing? You passed? Okay. Now we're back to Representative Howard.
All right, thank you. Right here. Hey, thank you. I concur. Thank you for your hard work on this as well. I have a friendly question, probably more of a common sense thought in my mind. What, in the growth manufacturing and production of this, and to get to I don't know how it's done, to get it to the liquid form, there will be byproducts, and there will be some security measures. Is there any thought or what's the mechanism, or how will we manage that piece?
That's a very good question. We haven't addressed it in the bill. We are going to leave that to rules and regulations to be established by the Georgia Medical Composite Board, the Patient Review Board, in conjunction with whatever academic medical center chooses to participate. And so at this point, we'll leave that to rules and regulations established by them.
Okay, so does that mean it would have to, I guess this is a general question, does that mean that it has to come back to us for rules, regulations, or they would make those rules?
They would make those rules and regulations unless we as a body decided that we needed to get involved and make specific regulations related to that. I'll tell you this, as we've addressed the cultivation issue and looked at what other states have done, they have provided specific regulations for the processing, cultivation, processing, and distribution. I think if it's the will of this committee and the will of the House that it move to the Senate, I think we're going to have to look at that. And this is a stage in the process, a bill that's going to continue to be vigorously debated. But I believe it may make some sense at the appropriate time to look at should we be drafting those rules and regulations. But right now, in the bill that we have drafted, it's left up to the Medical Composite Board. Doctors, which is made up of doctors.
To draft rules for the waste products? I saw Mr. Allen. Mr. Allen, can you address that? Would those byproducts fall under your, just so we can clarify it, because they would be
destroyed, yeah. I'm assuming that would be the process, yeah. Right.
Okay, so it wouldn't be under the medical board, it would be under,
Right.
so if you, as you look at these, who would it need to be under, as you look at this going forward? Pardon?
Yeah. And that's
You'll have to
clearly,
look at it?
that's clearly, Madam Chair, something we'd have to
Okay,
address, and we'll
because
continue to do that as we debate the issue, so.
They will look, okay, because I have to see who has to come in.
The only approved, Representative Howard, the only approved product would be the cannabidiol oil. And so, yes, any byproduct would have to be destroyed per rules and regulations in this bill per the Medical Deposit Board or in conjunction with Drugs and Narcotics or GBI.
Representative Chanel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Peake, I first want to applaud you for all your hard work in marshaling other people in this effort. You've made a difference, and I'm proud of you, and I know you're a great member of this body.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Every now and then, as everyone knows, we are citizen legislators. And every now and then something comes along that happens to be personal, because we are citizen legislators. We aren't insulated from all this sort of thing. It's personal for me. Little Elena, who has been in some of these commercials, is my wife's great niece. We have seen the results of the problems that she's had there personally. And it's personal to me. Our bottom line, what I got to say, and that is that what we have before us is not a perfect bill. It's not the end-all, do-all, but it is a start in moving the ball down the road. And in my judgment, that's what we have to do. It's hard to come to the realization sometimes that with this, frankly, it's not necessarily going to increase the lifespan of all of the kids. It's just not. But they will have a much better quality of life while they're still with us. FDA approval would be nice, but it's been pointed out, I think correctly, that with FDA approval, oftentimes there are more serious side effects than not having it. In any event, FDA approval can take generations, forever and ever. It'd be nice if it could be done in a timely fashion, but we all know that that's not something that can happen all of the time. It can take many, many years for that to happen. The truth of the matter is, a lot of these children don't have many, many, many years. That's the cold, hard facts of what we're dealing with. And I would suggest to my fellow members of this committee that we need to act on this. Let's get the ball moving down the road, see how far we get, and whatever changes that we have to make down the road, let's do it. But let's don't let the pursuit of the perfect keep us from doing the best we can right now with the facts and information that we have. Thank you very much. I intend to enthusiastically vote for your company.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that.
Representative Reinders.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank God for the bill for this very important piece of legislation. Is this just for children?
It is not drafted specifically for only children. It is,
because I've heard that in the life of the kids and all this, but any age can use it.
It's seizure. It's patients with seizure disorders. We didn't want to limit it to just children or age, because there are some that are in their 20s and 30s that, if they, in conjunction with their medical professional, felt like it could provide some benefit to them, they should have that option.
Thank you for that. I'd stated earlier, and I appreciate Chairman Chanel's comments about in search of perfection. I want to ask you, I want to just take you down the path of that issue of hope, because we don't know how long these children are going to have.
That's correct.
And what would we do as parents, and what would we do as physicians, and what would we do, maybe just one more dose? We talked about dose last time. All I want as we move forward is to make sure that how do we know what's the right kind of dose? Because if that mama looks at that physician and says just one more and something goes awry, does that physician, and Doc Watson, you might be able to help me, is there any liability? Does this protect you in any way? Because if someone's begging me, I got to be honest with you, there's a big part of me that goes, give them more. What have you got to lose? But if you lost your child, maybe it's easy to say that, but if you lost your child, is there any kind of liability for the physician or whoever's writing the prescription? Just walk me through that a little bit.
Well, I may defer to Dr. Watts on this. I'll give you my layman's perspective of this, is the parent's perspective, you know. And I would assume that if I was working with a professional physician, a medical professional whose creed is do no harm, and who is looking out in the best interest of that patient, and it's a physician that's approved in an academic research environment and approved, a pediatric neurologist who's approved by the Georgia Medical Composite Board. Those are the limited folks that would have the availability to do this. At some point I'd have to trust that doctor as a parent to tell me what is the proper dosage, what is the right amount.
And I apologize. I think we're going from memory from the last time, but didn't we talk about something like dosage per pound? Did I hear something like that in our last one?
That is correct. The cannabidiol oil that is being given in Colorado is based on weight, and they're trying to figure out what is the proper dosage based on weight.
And all I'm saying is because of what you just said, trying to figure out. I would hate for a well-intended physician or someone else, because of the wish of a parent and the unintended consequences, to get themselves in a particularly bad situation when all they're trying to do is do exactly what you want, which is to help.
Right. I may defer, Madam Chair, if I may defer to Dr. Watson, you probably answer better than I can.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, it will be measured in milligrams per kilogram or per weight, and second of all, it will be in protocol, drug studies that will be set amounts. And that's why the research needs to be done. And then you also have to remember that even in the FDA-approved drugs, when you push the limits of the medicines, they do have toxicities. We all know that, phenobarb, you have a specific level of 15 to 45, or dilantin 10 to 20 milligrams or so. But at times we do push those levels up, and it is a risk versus a benefit, whether it's FDA or non-FDA approved drugs that we prescribe. So it's a difficult spot. There's no doubt about that. But you do it with everybody's eyes wide open. You do it with the parents' eyes wide open, and you do it, hopefully in the best interest of the patient. And that's the whether we weigh that with high blood pressure medicines or with seizure medicines.
I would hope that as we move forward, that you seriously look at. I'm just going to assume not every primary care physician out there is going to be doing this.
Right.
But I think it's reasonable, if you're going to sit there and go, we want to see how this works, that they're potentially look at some kind of limited liability. And I'm not an attorney, but if not, I might be scared to push the envelope to see what I could do for the child.
Sure.
Let me ask if we have somebody that knows the answer to that. David Tatum is here with Children's. David, do you happen to know whether the researchers have any unusual liability when they're doing clinical research? That's what Representative Reinders is asking.
I'd hate to do exactly what that mama tells me, and God Almighty, something happened, and then get sued for it.
Madam Chair, Mr. Reinders, when you're doing clinical research, the participants in that study sign the appropriate waivers, paperwork, and the like. I think your question is more toward a physician recommending or suggesting the drug, and then the parent giving the drug to the child and something happening. That's a different situation than doing medical research.
Okay. Thank you, I guess, because I'm not legal enough to know the answer to my own question, but I'd hate for someone, because if someone's saying help me, I don't want to help them.
I have a question for you. In the short time period that I had to read the bill and going over Rona's excellent long thing of the bill, okay, it's my understanding that we're going to have clinical research trials.
That's correct. It will be done in academic medical centers, right?
Right, but it would be with something we grew, which would not have FDA approval.
That's correct.
Now, I'm just asking. I'm not saying I'm against the. Okay. And David, how does an academic institution, can you do clinical trials on a substance that is not FDA approved?
Let me answer that.
Okay.
It'll take a couple of minutes. Children's supports doing clinical trials on this to determine safety, effectiveness. We see 300 kids a year. We're willing to do it and have an interest in doing it. When I presented last time, I had our chief of neurology, and the question came up, can you use a substance on humans that is non-FDA approved in the clinical trial and not threaten your federal and other research funds? And the answer to that, unfortunately, is no. We can use the Epidiolex, and there's another company that has a similar synthetic for clinical trials, and my understanding is in Colorado, I'm focused on Colorado, in Mississippi. At the University of Mississippi, the National Institute on Drug Abuse has contracted with the university, it's actually in the middle of the campus of Ole Miss of all places, to grow clinical research marijuana for these uses. And if that oil could be obtained, to my understanding, it is available to academic research institutions and can be sent to us for that purpose. If it's grown in Georgia, we couldn't use it for research purposes until whatever is grown, refined, processed is submitted to the FDA for approval. Now, if it is formulated and pured and it's similar in makeup of what Mississippi grows, I don't know how FDA would treat that. But just because it's grown here, I don't think we would be able to do it, because to do otherwise, we'd lose our federal, and I've told Representative Peake this, our federal research funds, and the FDA would prohibit further investigation. It's just a reality.
Representative Peake, I think that, I mean, I'm not going to hold the bill up, I'll let it move, but I think that is a real stumbling block for you as we go forward. If we grow it, and our academics, and it's my understanding that all our academic institutions follow the same ratio. That's what I've been told, by the chancellor and everybody. So no academic research institute can take something that is not FDA approved and use it in clinical trials on humans, as you heard.
Madam
Yes.
Chair.
Shepherd Center every day has patients such as myself and others who are participating in clinical trials on non-FDA approved drugs and equipment.
You are at a hospital. That Shepherd's is a hospital. They must run on different standards. I'm just telling you what the chancellors has sent over, and I mean, we'll go ahead, and if the committee wants to move the bill, but Representative Peake, I think you really need to look at that if you want a bill that is just a bill that can't be inactive. And I'm only getting information from our academic research.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say in conclusion to my point is if we've got a physician and we had a child that was having 20 seizures a day, we got a physician that's got them down to 6, a lot of people would consider that a victory. What happens if they say, you know what, just a little bit more, let's see if we can't get them down to 3, and something were to happen?
Sure.
I want that measure somewhat fixed, because we're following the will of a parent and hoping for the best kind of results.
Okay. Madam Chair, if I can, let me just address a couple of issues that David Tatum brought up. And he has been a huge asset. I'm publicly thank you for all the input you've given me on learning through this process. In the bill, David was exactly right. In the bill, there is still the option to obtain cannabidiol oil from the NIDA, National Institute of Drug Abuse, marijuana farm, if you will, at Ole Miss. It is still in place right now, and there is a lot of public pressure to begin to grow the cannabidiol oil at Ole Miss, at this cannabis facility. That is, we're leaving that in the bill as an option. If that were to happen over the next year before we come back, or some of us don't come back, we get beat, all of us are back, to obtain it from there as well too. Second, regarding the Academic Research Center, you're right, Madam Chair, that is an obstacle, and it is a challenge. I have had discussions with folks from Georgia Regents, both our public institutions at Georgia Regents, but I've also had discussions with the folks at Emory who are hesitant. I've had discussions with the folks at Mercer who seem to be eager to get engaged if it were to be state law to go down this process. Folks at Morehouse have given an indication as well, too, that they would be interested in, again, there's a hesitation until it's state law, as you can understand. And so I think there is an opportunity out there, and particularly the fact that it's an ever-changing landscape on the federal level, too, as far as the rules and regulations related to this. So you're right. There are some challenges. There is no doubt ahead of us.
Okay.
But I believe that if we have the framework, set up the framework, make sure we're prepared for this ever-changing landscape, it helps us be ahead of the game to be prepared to help these families when it becomes available.
Where's the line that you can get it from Mississippi? Why would we exclude the 2 British firms that now have it available and it's in trials? There's 2 British firms. One makes a synthetic, one makes that's Epidiolex, which, if the information we received from you about the composition of Charlotte's oil is very similar to what they are testing now. It was reported that Charlotte's oil had 97% CBD. I hate them. I get them confused. CBD. And that what is known and tested in what's been FDA approved from the British companies is 98%. So why, does this bill exclude?
No, two parts of the question. I'll take you to line 193 through 197, which to address making sure we do have the opportunity to, it reads, an academic medical center operating on the program may apply to contract with NIDA for the receipt of cannabis pursuant to the NIDA, Food and Drug Administration, and the United States Drug Enforcement. That language, and Lynn, you'll have to help me, that is the language that we put in so that we still have the option to get it from Ole Miss,
Well,
if you will.
what about, I'm talking about...
Okay. In the second question about the Epidiolex or another drug, I would make the argument that if that's the only option we're going to provide to our families, we don't need a bill. These families now have the option to participate in a clinical trial.
But why would we exclude them?
But there is no exclusion. They have the right to.
Okay.
Yeah, there's.
Okay, are they a legal source? Okay.
If that's all we were going to say to these families is, okay, you can just participate in a clinical trial, there's really no reason for a bill.
Yeah, Representative, I think it is. I think that when we put a bill through this legislature, many times we are sending a message. And when the legislature sends a message with a bill and says that we want these clinical trials, I think it sends a message to our academic universities to say, hey, come on, get on board, help us out. Let's start testing what's available to us and help these children.
Yes, ma'am. And I think you and I are in agreement on that. My point was that they really don't need the bill to do the trials. You're right. There is no doubt. And in fact, and I'll even go a step further with you in agreeing with you that by doing this, we send a message to start these trials, but I think it also sends a message across the country that we as a state are going, hey, it's time to look at this. It's time for DEA to look at relaxing the restrictions on having marijuana as a Schedule I drug. The more states that get involved in this, the more states that lead the charge, I think you're going to see some relaxing of those restrictions. So
I agree with you, but I think you do have that major obstacle. And I don't know how you overcome it. Is there I think there's somebody here from Morehouse. I thought somebody was coming from Morehouse. Nope. I guess they didn't make it. When they called, I didn't get the return phone call back. And
you're right, though, that there are challenges. There's no doubt about it. But I think by heading down this path, it helps us continue the discussion to overcome those challenges.
No, I just think that we may be running the fact that federal law cannot state law cannot trump federal law. And like David said, from my conversations with all of them, and I think Mercer would follow the thing, is that they would lose their federal funding and they would not get FDA approval for clinical trials. Here again, Representative Peake, I want a bill that is not giving false hopes, that really can, start doing what we say it's going to do. And so I'm asking you to look at that obstacle. The time is late. We don't have a lot of time to go over this anymore unless you solve that problem. But I think it is something that you need to look at very seriously of how you do that and get the clinical trials when we are hearing from all the universities that they can't do it.
And I guess I would make the argument that give me a chance to continue to have that discussion with them.
Are you that wealthy that you can give them back all their funds and replace what they would
Those
lose in
people get out
federal
here and go eat
funding?
Cheddars, I may get a little wealthier. So.
Wow, we're all have to eat a lot of cheddars to let you replace the federal funding. David, did you hear that for children's and all, for, to do it? So anyway, okay. Representative Sharper. Okay, Representative Hawkins.
I want to make sure this is very clear. We're passing legislation that cannot be enacted, but rather be in place in case the feds, FDA or DEA, right, Rick, change their position or change federal law. Is that correct?
That is correct, Representative Hawkins. Or if a Mercer chose to make a courageous step and say, well, we'll make this leap with you. There's no guarantee that's going to happen.
Right, right.
There's no guarantee.
Right.
And we do face some challenges,
right.
but that is correct, yes.
So you're asking us to vote for a bill that we know we cannot really put into law without the Fed or what you're speaking of, right?
I would say we can put it in law. That's what we do.
Right.
But we can have the framework.
Cannot enact it.
We can have the framework that's ready to respond to the ever-changing landscape
right.
Of rules and regulations about
okay.
cannabis.
I think I accept that.
To me, as a parent, as a legislator, as a citizen, as a father, I think that's a prudent thing to do.
Well, Representative Peake, as I've said, we thank you for bringing it, but I think that's a good approach to have as long as the word goes out through the media and from you that we are enacting a law right now that, we might be passing a law that can't be enacted, and parents realize that. I have a real problem, and I say we already have that problem from the media. Somehow it's gotten wrong because children's have families calling, wanting to know how soon they're going to be able to get the medicine, and they want to make the appointment now. I know your intentions are the best in the world, but I'm having a problem with raising parents' expectation that we are going to get them something very quickly, and when it looks like we may not be able to do that. And I think that the word has to go about that. That is why, as discussions with you, I have so pushed the Epidiolex, because, CHOA told me that in 4 to 9 months, they could realistically have trials going with expanded access. And that is why I was so pushing that, is because it looked like a realistic thing that was out there that we could get to these people right away. So as long as, if we do, as Dr. Hawkins said, and just be honest about it and put the word out that it may not come quickly, and our families understand it, not because we don't want to help you, but because of federal law and problems like that we may not be able to overcome with all our efforts and best trying it.
And you're exactly right. I don't want to provide false hope either. I am an optimist, and I do believe that as states like Georgia lead the way, that there will put some pressure on the federal level to make some changes that it would be good and be prudent for us to be ready to adapt to those changes.
But like I say, I'm going to be pushing CHOA to push the fact that they will go ahead and push for the Epidiolex studies. And let's get something, a bird in the hand's worth two in the bush. Get those expanded access, and you go ahead and you push the feds. And I would say to the parents, we need to start pushing the feds. You're ready for a motion? Well, excuse me. We are getting ready to go at Representative Kaiser.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So the optimist in me would just like to say, I know this has been a hard road for you because you've had a lot of due diligence to do, and it's why I love being on this committee, because I think, do we vet bills more than any other committee in the House? I'm not sure. It feels like it, but that's why I like being part of this committee. So
thank you. With
this motion, I hope that we join the 20 other states and be the 21st state to show that there is a medicinal property to this. And so I would like to make a motion, do pass, substitute to House Bill 885.
Got lots of seconds. We have an amendment. Y'all got the amendment ready? Okay, Betsy?
All right, on page 8, line 60 to 278, put in its place the word reserve, and then we'll have to reflect that as a title. So back on page 1, on line 11, we're going to delete the clause that says to provide for a pilot program for industrial.
What line's that on?
11.
She said,
Okay, got it. Okay, and,
I am in support of that amendment. So,
okay, we have the amendment. Do I hear a motion?
Motion.
Okay, so moved. Second? All right, everybody in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No, we're back on about the bill. Is there any more discussion? No, and before we quit voting and everybody leaves, did I miss the Ag Commissioner? Oh, now we have the Ag Commissioner, because I know a lot of people are going to be leaving. Stand up, please. Did before we vote this out, we omitted that part about the Ag? That take care of everything for you before we, thank you very much for coming. So it's our Commissioner of Agriculture, Mr. Black. So thank you very much. Okay, we have to do pass the substitute as amended. Everybody in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? No. And the ayes have it.
Thank
Step
you,
forward.
Chairman, members of the committee. Appreciate your support and your courage in standing up for our families and our state. Thank you.
What do we got?
I just wanted to the restroom, Madam Chairwoman. Two more. Yeah, I'm just wondering.
Okay. If okay, I don't know. Can we, Alan, can you ask people? We're going to lose a quorum, ladies. We're going to lose a quorum, and we got a couple of other bills. You're welcome. You do have that problem, Alan. I hope you will talk about the fact that we may not do this quickly on the press. Oh, sorry. Okay, guys. Come on, let's show respect. We've got a couple of bills. I can't lose my quorum. Okay, Senator Burke.
I'll wait until he comes to my committee.
Madam Chair, are we going to put Richard on the docket for
I have no earthly idea. Could you just stop and we can turn it over to Senator Burke, please? Okay, Senator Burke, what's the bill number? Okay, Senate Bill 342.
Thank you, Madam
You've got
Chair.
it.
And members of the committee, I appreciate your working late tonight and getting this done. I'm working off LC 335374. In a nutshell, this bill gives the Department of Public Health the ability to disclose age confidential information. It basically is a way to get people that are not in treatment. They've been diagnosed with HIV, but they're not in treatment, to get them back into treatment. And right now, the law prohibits the Department of Public Health from notifying me as a physician or Dr. Watson as a physician that their patient is positive for HIV and not getting therapy. Be glad to answer questions if any of the members have questions.
Okay. Representative Mitchell.
Yes, Senator Burke, who would the department may be able to disclose this information, and under what circumstances?
Well, it would only be to a health care provider that has been identified as being involved in the treatment of that patient. So one example might be a patient who's in an emergency room, say in Atlanta, for another reason, and the electronic health record now, they will be able in the future, as this rolls out, will be able to let that treating provider know that that patient is HIV positive and is not getting care. And the purpose of that is so that that provider knows and can say, I'm treating you for this broken bone, but by the way, you're not getting treatment for this serious medical problem, and we would encourage you to get that treatment. So it is, the whole purpose is to get people the care that they need. Studies estimate right now that only 30% of patients that are HIV positive are receiving care for their disease. And a patient that's not getting care is at risk themselves. Obviously, the disease will progress if they're not getting treatment. And they're also at risk of spreading the disease. And if they're getting treatment, 95% is the current estimate, decreased likelihood that they would be able to spread the disease.
Madam Chair, if I may further, would this place a duty on the physician in the scenario which you painted to positively report? Say he had a conversation with the patient and did not feel the need to go any further or to report any further. Would this place an additional duty on him to report it to some other physician that he may be under?
No more than the duty that we all have towards those types of issues, I mean, in everyday practice. In other words, it's always best in patient care circumstances to communicate one physician to another physician when patients are receiving care. I mean, that's what we do every day.
Interesting.
Dr. Burke, isn't this supported by certainly the gay community is not the only person that has HIV, but isn't this supported, I think, by them fully? And
this is a bill that's brought by the Department of Public Health through Dr. Fitzgerald's group, Dr. O'Neill. Some of those folks are here to be available if you have questions. And they vetted this throughout the stakeholder community over the last couple of years.
Right.
And to my knowledge, there's no opposition.
Right.
They're all in support.
Okay. Representative. Right. Okay.
If I may, what is the protocol now?
Right now, it is against the law for the Department of Public Health to notify any provider that a patient is HIV positive. Now, if they have a patient that's got TB, they can notify a provider that patient's got TB and not getting treatment. If a patient's got syphilis, they can notify. But with HIV, they cannot. And that, I think that's unfortunate. It's costing a lot of people lives in Georgia.
I mean, the whole purpose of this, isn't it? Let me clarify, Dr. Burke, is that if patients drop out of treatment with HIV, their life expectancy is much shorter. The cost of their care as they get sicker and sicker is astronomical. Most of these patients are on federal and state assistance, many of them.
I would say the majority.
Majority of them are. And so not only is there terrible human cost, but there's also terrible cost in medical care.
That's right. And
we're trying to help people stay on their regimen and stay alive.
If I may, Madam Chair, I believe Louisiana has instituted a similar program to this, and they increased their people in treatment from 35% up to 70 to 75%. I mean, it more than doubled the number of people that were in treatment because they had this same ability.
To follow up. Okay, Representative Watson.
Thanks, Senator Burton, Madam Chairwoman. Ever since this legislation came into existence, I thought it was always ridiculous that the a health department could report syphilis or gonorrhea or any of their reportable illnesses. Yet when we want to take care of the patient with HIV or AIDS, then we're not doing that. I never understood the logic behind that. I applaud you for bringing it to us. Thank you very much. And the other issue too, back when that legislation was enacted, the HIPAA or the Health Information Privacy Act was not in existence, and now it is, and that protects us, maybe too restrictively, but at times it certainly seems that way. But the safeguards are in there if anybody's worried about privacy from a HIPAA standpoint. But from treatment of the patient, I think this is certainly needed. And when the time is appropriate, I would certainly be happy to make a motion.
I think, Dr. Watson, you're younger than I am. I'll tell you why that is because at that time it was mainly in the gay community, and discrimination was such an issue that they were afraid that if anybody knew it, they would lose their jobs, be put out of their homes, their apartments, just shunned. And that's why it was such a thing about keeping it kind of like that. Representative Hawkins.
Dr. Burke, Senator Burke, I too commend you for bringing this bill. But I would ask you to consider a friendly amendment. Your two chapters do not include dentists. We often see patients much more often and frequently than the physician does. So would you consider including at the end of line 11, chapter 11, in other words, chapter 26, 34, or 11, or whichever numerical we would want to, probably 11, 26, or 34? Would you be able to include that?
My understanding was healthcare provider was covered, but if legislative council says that would make it clear, because absolutely, you're right.
Because dental treatment's in chapter 11. Okay.
Okay.
Betsy, you'd just want to go ahead and say what, chapter 11, comma 26 or 34? Okay.
Dr. Hawkins, I'm not against that amendment, but let me work this through. Okay, they would be, public health would be reporting to you as a dentist, so you would make sure they got their follow-up dental care?
Really, if you look deep into this, I'm not sure how this is really going to work, because if a patient comes into a physician's office with a broken finger, how are they going to know that the patient is not following through with their AIDS treatment, Dr. Burke?
Madam Chair, if I may, Dr. Kelly with the Public Health HIV sections here, and she may want to weigh in on this before we do that. Madam Chair, is that okay?
Oh, sure.
Thank you, Jane Kelly. I'm a physician, and I'm the director of the HIV epidemiology program at the Georgia Department of Public Health. There are several different scenarios, but to entertain the dental scenario, it could be that a person could present, let me use the case of Emory. They present to Emory or to Grady infectious disease program, and they're seeking dental care. That person may have had a screening HIV test. It was positive, but they never came back for the results. So the patient themselves might not know. But if we can set up a system such that I may know, because I get the laboratory reports as per Georgia law. So I may know the person's status. The person doesn't know. So even if that dentist asked, the patient might not know. But we can set up a system by this small change in the law so that I can communicate that information to the dentist. Because the way it is right now, even if that dentist called me and we had some way I could verify who that person was, it's illegal for me to disclose that information. And the reality is we do have many people who get tested, never return for results. They get tested at some community event.
So you're going to be able to do this because of electronic records?
Yes.
Okay, so that you would know that he would be going
And that
to
might be one way. There'll be other ways as well.
Okay. Betsy?
It would be by something.
Okay, would you work on that in a minute?
It'll work. Just put chapter 11 in. 11, comma 26 or 34. That takes care of it.
Put 26, 11. Okay, got it. Or 34. Okay. Representative Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Burke. Question I have, is just forgive my ignorance, is when it says it would be reported to a healthcare provider, is that just in an electronic database that's accessible to any healthcare providers, or is that to their? And if so, how do you know who their provider is? Forgive my ignorance.
Well, one of the reasons that this was brought forward is, again, as Madam Chair discussed with electronic health records, there's going to be in the very near future kind of real-time access to where the public health can set up kind of a red flag that'll pop up, in the health system as one of these electronic health records is communicating with another, and that's part of what the department is working on is with some grant money trying to establish this kind of system in several of the high volume clinics in the state that are already have the capability of utilizing that knowledge. And so over time, as that technology improves, then it may be available statewide at this very near future. At least from a real-time standpoint, it probably would only involve 2 or 3 of the big clinics in the state that the public health is working with.
Representative Sharper.
Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, what? Yeah, you're on.
Looking at it from the medical standpoint, been in the medical field over 20 years, I think this is going to do more than just the information. Being that in emergency rooms, a lot of people come back every month, every week sometime, and the physicians, by them having this information, they'll know for one that you have something that if you don't get the problem solved, it's going to be recurring because you have so many other situations. And also in life-threatening situations, if the physicians or the medical provider will know that this is going to be also a help with the risk of the medical professionals themselves, nurses, doctors, whoever's there, to know that that's something, because if not, they could be infected. But I think this has been a long time coming, and just like the GRIP program, stations and things like that, this is going to just filter right in and be a big plus for the community.
I lost my. Thank you. Okay, that's the last of the questions. What's the wish of the committee? Okay, we got and I'm sorry, I'm really getting bad, Dr. Watson. You wanted to make the motion, but I'm sorry. Okay. We have a motion do pass and a second and we have an amendment. The amendment is to add 11 on the 11th line after chapter, put 11, 26 or 34. What do I hear on that? So moved in a second. Everybody in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. Everybody opposed, no. Okay, we're back to the bill. Any other further discussion? Okay. Yes, sir.
We have on line 9 where it says may disclose. Do we really accomplish what we're trying to accomplish with may disclose, or should it say shall disclose? It doesn't make any difference to me. I'm all in favor of the bill. Just a question.
Would you like to?
May disclose certainly serves our purposes. I don't know whether shall disclose then becomes a problem because
if you miss somebody,
you might not have a way to communicate with some rural provider.
The problem later on, we can always come back and change it to shall.
Either live another day, huh?
That's right.
Okay, so any other discussion? Okay, everyone in the favor of the passage of Senate Bill 342 as amended, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? No? Okay, the ayes have it. Senator Burke, thank you for waiting with us this late at night. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee.
Okay. It's late. Yeah. Huh? Yeah, we're going to have a hearing. If you can stay with me, I don't think this will be a long thing. Representative Watson, I have to go meet a deadline. Will you, as my former vice chair, take over? We'll have a few more meetings before you go to the Senate side. Okay, and go ahead and, y'all, what is it, 6:06? Want to call up and everybody come up for 6:06? Okay, here we go. Now here, I'm out of this place.
Don't you?
That's right.
You're the leader now. Of this. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I am going to be short. House Bill.
We we don't need, okay, we don't need a quorum, but if any of y'all can show courtesy to our colleague and stay and listen to his.
I'm going to be very, very short, guys, and we're going to get out of here. I know we all got to go home. 606 has somehow gotten off to the weeds in discussion. It's caused a lot of questions that, quite frankly, are not related to the code section of the bill. I've told you what it deals with is particularly the licensed home health care providers. Here's the issue. We have code section and we have rules and regs that conflict with each other. That conflict is that it allows for both employee and independent contractors to go out and to serve those folks in the home. But yet, the rules and regs that are promulgated by the department clearly state, and if you read through them, they clearly put those people who are in those homes up under the control of the licensed health care provider. And as such, if you cannot be an independent contractor and then work for someone and they have control over you, where you work, when you work, how you do it, all of those things are clear under labor law, our tax code, and that's the point I'm making. I've had a good discussion with Department of Community Health. In a second, I'm going to ask Lisa Marie, she's going to get up and give a brief statement. I have had a conversation with Department of Community Health, and I think they do realize there is some conflict, and that's all I want to do tonight is let this committee know that this is a real issue, okay? There's nothing sinister about it. It's very controlled to this section, and that we're going to look at this over the interim, and we're going to make sure that the details and everything are there, and we're going to try to make sure that as we come back next year, and hopefully we all or some of us will, is that we'll make sure that we've got consistency between our code and our rules and regulations. With that, I'm going to ask Lisa Marie to come up and from the Department of Community Health, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you both would come up and join Chairman Knight and just introduce yourself and identify yourself, if you would, please.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. My name is Mary Scruggs, and I am the director of our Healthcare Facility Regulation Division within the Georgia Department of Community Health, and we are responsible for licensing the private home care providers. We do have rules in place that are consistent with the law that allow services to be provided through employees, independent contractors, or through referrals to others. And the department is neutral on House Bill 606, but through our conversations with Chairman Knight, and we certainly appreciate that, we have identified a conflict in our licensing rules that we need to address. And Chairman Knight did speak to the issue of supervision. Our licensing rules are drafted from the perspective of quality of care, and so there is a requirement for the private home care provider that he must not only supervise employees, but also the independent contractors. So we certainly acknowledge that from a labor and tax perspective, that creates an issue for the private home care provider to have control over an independent contractor. So we certainly will take a look at our rules, and we need to address that conflict.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Talking about the labor law, that pretty much the way the independent contractors work under supervision, they're pretty much employees. That is pretty much so. And I think your rule is 333. Is it in the regs 333? Is that? I looked at it last time.
It's 111-8-65 is the chapter that has our licensing rules.
Okay, but there was something I think in 333 I looked at last time. Anyway, but I think from the testimony again last time, what we said was that these relationships mirrored more an employer-employee relationship rather than an independent contractor outside of that. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman Chokas, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question that I have is to Chairman Knight. Is this a study committee or is this a House bill? What are you trying to specifically accomplish?
Specifically, let me tell you, this bill's not ready to go forward at this late hour. Okay, and I'm not going to push the time of this General Assembly. It's not ready to go out of this committee. It needs looking at. All I'm trying to do at this point, because we got off so far in the weeds, is to make sure that this committee realizes this is a real issue, and that I really, from a healthcare point of view, I'm not trying to get into what is the rules and regs and what's being accomplished there, okay? But what I'm trying to say is that we're putting, I still think there may be, and we'll look at this over summer, I still think there may be some jeopardy to the state should we be in conflict, and if that's ever pushed, we possibly could be in jeopardy from the federal funds that we receive that go out here. And I'm going to tell you, another thing that we're putting people in jeopardy is we're putting our small businesses in jeopardy because they're coming in here and they're relying on Georgia code, and Georgia code says we can do this. I'm going to tell you, when the IRS comes in or Department of Revenue comes in or Department of Labor comes in, they don't care what that code is. And that business may be in for a shock of its life, okay, should they come under an audit and all of a sudden they owe all of these back taxes, back payroll issues, workers' comp, unemployment, all of that issues are things that I think, we're putting people at jeopardy. And again, guys, I'm not trying to set what the rules are. All I'm trying to say is we've got a conflict. And the last thing we want is our small businesses, our businesses across Georgia, to be in jeopardy because they're following Georgia law, and Georgia law right now could get them in trouble. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I know the hour's late. That is my final say-so on this. I've talked with the commissioner and with his able staff. We're going to work over on the interim, and we're going to make sure that we research this, and we come back to this committee or wherever next year, and that we try to make sure that we're clear.
We got a couple more questions.
Okay.
Representative Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. And Chairman Knight, I just want to thank you for your the example you've been as a chairman, carrying a bill that you're passionate about, and that you've listened to all the parties and been willing to take your time with this and not only get it right, but listen to the input from the members of the committee. And I know we met for quite a while in your office, and we've had a couple conversations. I thank you for that. I appreciate you taking the time to bring it back. You said you're going to discuss this and educate the committee and maybe come back next year. And as you know, I may not be here next year. And so
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you, Chairman.
My vice chair of my committee, we're going to miss you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I guess just one thing I would like to ask, if I may, from the committee, and I have a lot of confidence in you as a small business owner and the chair of the Small Business Committee. But, one of the concerns that I have, and I guess I'm addressing this also to DHS, that I just hope I've heard some say there's nothing we can't change the regs or massage that at all in order to ensure that we're not putting employers in a conflict with the federal law involving independent contractors. But I just hope that we do take a look at that, since we're not voting on that this year, and just ensure that there's nothing that we can do, especially considering that this is dealing with just Medicaid dollars and even a subsection, I've been told, of that from my conversations with both of you. Because my concern, I guess what I wanted to say is, my concern is, and you've seen this since I've been here for 4 years, is making sure, and I know you care about this also, Chairman Knight, but making sure that those who can't afford or who have a limited budget or trying to care for somebody who's elderly, that they have access to affordable care, either through a personal home care provider or a personal care home. One of the first times I spoke up in this committee had to do with that issue, and that's obviously a big issue between nursing homes. That's a whole other issue, and assisted living homes and personal home care homes. But my concern all along, and you've been kind of listening to me, is just making sure that before we outlaw independent contractors, that we look at every other angle to make sure, is that something we have to do? Because I've talked to other, I've talked to, over the last week, a lot of, not a lot, but several personal home care providers, and they believe it will raise the cost. But if we have to do that to be in compliance with federal law, then I understand what you're getting at. And protect the patient, yeah. But anyway, I just thank you for your due diligence looking into this, and I just asked DHS if we really can examine this and look at, is there anything that we can do to ensure that if we can come into compliance without outlawing independent contractors. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank y'all. It's late. Let's get home to our families.
Well, I'm sorry, we had one more question. Representative Fullerton, we welcome you back, and you have the last word here.
Representative, thank you for the question. You know, I'm not sure a formal study committee is needed, but I would and just like Representative Clark has said, I've been very open to anybody that's got questions, and I would certainly, if yourself or any other member of the committee would like to be in discussion as we look at this over to Interim, if you'll let me know, and as we look at this, I would love to have your participation, whether it's a conference call as we meet and we talk about this, or if we can schedule meetings up here where we can meet. I would welcome your participation along with any other member's participation in this, and I think we can solve this.
Thank you, Chairman Knight, and with that, meeting's adjourned.